Welcome to Looking at Lucasfilm, the podcast with a different perspective on the world of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and all of the other entities that George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy, and the rest of the team at Lucasfilm have dreamed up over the past 40 years. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host, the one and only Dan Z, and I are recording this on Wednesday, October 16th. It's been a while since Dan and I recorded a show together. In fact, Dan, I owe you a thank you because you covered for me at the Indy Disney meet when Nancy and I got sick and couldn't make the drive out to Indianapolis. So thanks for doing that.
Hey, that was my pleasure. Not only did I get to bring my good buddy Tom Gross, who joins me quite a bit on Coffee with Kenobi as a CWK newsman, but I got to spend a lot of time with the amazing Aaron Adams, and he is even more awesome in person. We had a blast. It was great to talk to listeners and supporters of you and the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. It was fun. I'm telling you what, I was actually legitimately thinking about this morning how much I'm looking forward to going back next year.
Well, more to the point, you guys did good work. I want to say they raised $53,000 for the Give Kids the World Village. So kudos to everybody who was there. Aaron reached out, Aaron Del Prince, the gentleman behind Indy Disney Meet, and was sort of like, you're on board for the next one. So it's like, so I guess it's the next one. And I said yes. So, and hopefully you can come along as well. So,
oh yeah,
all right.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Anyway, folks, again, it's been a while since Dan and I've talked, and a Star Destroyer's worth of Star Wars related news has exploded in the pop culture sphere since that time. So let's just get to it, Dan. And for my way of thinking, I guess the place to start would be Triple Force Friday. That happened back on October 4th. And I know, Dan, from our conversations in between recording here, that you were kind of disappointed that a lot of the retailers around the country, and again, you got to understand, folks, that over 500,000 locations supposedly took part in this global product rollout. But a number of retailers here in the U.S. opted not to do what they had done in the past, which was open at 12:01 a.m. on the day of Force Friday, so that the most dedicated of Star Wars fans could then get the very first shot at this new merch.
Yeah, this was a hard one for me because besides the great mythology that is the Star Wars saga, it's the collecting and the merchandise and that thrill of the hunt, that Indiana Jones feeling we get when we're running out to stores, hoping, climbing over our brethren, trying to get a hold of the latest Star Wars merchandise. And when you find out that they're doing it for 3 different stories, The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, you're expecting a lot. But the problem is that stores didn't open at midnight. And I know we're going to talk about the history of Force Friday because there's certainly a lot there, a lot of pedigree there.
Well, yeah.
But they weren't just doing it. I reached out through our Coffee with Kenobi Twitter feed to ask Target, and they said our stores are going to open at their normal times on Friday morning. And then I reached out to Walmart's PR, and they told me that there are 3 stores in Illinois that are going to be having festivities for Triple Force Friday, and they sent me all of them, and they were all at least 2.5 hours away from me. So if they were going to open at midnight, I still had to work the next day. I wouldn't have slept at all, and I would not be any good to anybody. So I just couldn't. So Corey and I still went out and we tried just to look at stuff. Walmart didn't have anything out for us. Target closed at their normal time, so we basically just recorded a segment talking about what we were hoping for. And again, it's disappointment that I didn't get that experience. This is the last movie in the Skywalker saga, the illustrious Skywalker saga. For multiple films, I got to experience part of that Star Wars experience is Force Friday, and not getting it for the last one, it was kind of puzzling to me because I feel like you need to go out with a bang, and it kind of went out with more of a hooray.
And it's interesting you say that because you're right. That there was the first Force Friday held back in September 2015, and that was out ahead of Force Awakens, which opened in December 18th of that year. And then the next one, what's kind of interesting about the one that was done for Rogue One is that if you do talk with the folks at Disney Consumer Products, they don't necessarily consider that a Force Friday because, again, Force Friday 2 was done in 2017 out ahead of Last Jedi. So
Right.
that was
The Rogue One they called Rogue Friday.
there. We go.
And
Okay.
and that one will always be incredibly important to me because that's the one that I did the Target commercial for.
That's right. That's right. And so yes, you're right. The notion of here's the third film of the new trilogy and the end of the Star Wars, or excuse me, the Skywalker saga, and you'd expect this to be a big thing. And what's kind of interesting from my side of the fence is, again, you reach out to Walmart and Target. I reached out to my friends at Disney Consumer Products, which again now has been lumped into Disney Parks and Experiences and Products. That's all under Bob Chapek's Ballywick these days. And they had kind of an interesting story to tell that really does sort of not necessarily key off of what happened with Last Jedi, but more to the point what happened with Solo, A Star Wars Story, which, by the way, you and I, Dan, have talked about at length. We both enjoy this film. But if the interesting thing is you talk with people on the retail side of things, and it's a very different story. There's a genuine belief that, at least on the Disney consumer product side of things, that it was a mistake to have two Star Wars films basically arrive in theaters within 6 months of one another, especially when you consider how retail worked. So the Force Friday of Last Jedi, that happened. I mean, that was the earliest, wasn't it? September 1st, 2017.
Yeah,
and the film wouldn't arrive in theaters till December 17th. There are actually several waves of merch in the retail world. You get stuff that hits store shelves early. You then get a second wave of product that arrives pretty much in the same window as the actual film hitting theaters. And then there's a third wave that's supposed to key off of the Blu-ray DVD, which typically hits store shelves 3 months after the theatrical release. And this was the situation with Last Jedi. The Blu-ray hit store shelves on March 27th of 2018. But the problem is that here is Solo, A Star Wars Story, to be released in theaters May 25th. So in order to have the traditional at least 6 weeks ahead for that first wave of merch, that meant that the first wave of Solo stuff showed up in the retail space in April 13th of 2018. And again, this is now just basically 2.5 weeks after the Blu-ray of The Last Jedi has gone on sale. And you're a retail, and you have only so much shelf space in your store. And you've got all of this Last Jedi related stuff that you're still hoping to sell because the Blu-ray has raised awareness of this film. And now here comes a wave of Solo, A Star Wars Story stuff, which you now have to create space for in the store, prominently display, because that's the contract you've signed. But at the same time, keep the Star Wars Last Jedi stuff front of mind. And it became a very tough situation. In fact, a lot of retailers reported back to Disney that, they felt that, by these two films being out in basically the same retail window, basically crowded each other out for shelf space. They confused consumers. And the weird part of it is when Nate and I were out actually on the morning of Force Friday looking for, merch related to The Rise of Skywalker, we came across several Solo items that were still sitting there on store shelves that had yet to sell. So to circle back to why, instead of hey, big push, this is the last film of the Skywalker saga, that somewhat, mediocre response, it not only came on the heels of the fact that, the big box stores were feeling kind of burned by Disney consumer products because of what had happened with Solo and the amount of product they were stuck with. But there was actually considerable pushback over the fact that this retail rollout, this product rollout, wasn't just focused on the last film of the Skywalker saga, that it was also Mandalorian, which is, kind of an unknown quantity at this point, coupled with the Electronic Arts game. And, to further muddy the water, someone at Disney Consumer Product got the smart idea, well, hell, if we're doing this big event for Star Wars, why don't we piggyback our first wave of Frozen merch for Frozen 2, in stores at the same time. And that particularly, I think the people who are in charge of the Star Wars account are especially upset about what happened with Target in regard to the situation. Have you been to your local Target since Force Friday, Dan?
Just on Force Friday itself, but I haven't been back since. Tell me about this. What happened?
If you walk into your local Target now, literally as you come through the door, the very first thing you're going to see is a Frozen 2 standalone store. They're contractually obligated to put this as close to the entrance as they possibly can. I want to say for some stores it's 1,200 square feet, some it's 1,500 square feet, but it's a huge display. And, the irony is, in the past, if you remember when you'd go to Target, where they literally had those things they put over the window where it was stormtroopers, effectively guarding the store.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the very first thing you would have saw was Star Wars. But, in this time around, it was Frozen 2 that basically put Star Wars in the shadows. I mean, you had to hike all the way to the back of the store to find the special Star Wars, a Triple Force Friday display, and not a lot of people happy about that. So, speaking of which, all right, so talk to me when you finally got back. Again, I know you went around to the local stores the night of Triple Force to try to get a preview. When you actually got back into the store, what was your shopping experience?
It was cool. I mean, after collecting since I was 7 years old, I kind of have a way of doing things and where to find things and all that good stuff. But I went to 3 different Walmarts and 2 Targets, and I found everything that I needed. Mm-hmm. The best part is I got to bring my 6-year-old Mason with me. Oh. And it was his first Force Friday event, even though it wasn't what it used to be. Mm-hmm. He didn't know the difference. He and his dad just had fun going to shop. In fact, at school, he wrote a note saying he was excited to go buy Star Wars toys with his daddy. And that honestly was better to me than anything that could have possibly happened. And that is just why I think it's so important that we continue as a Star Wars community to encourage Disney and Lucasfilm in a positive way to try to foster more of this, because it really is a great experience for friends and family to share their love of this mythology together. And plus, we buy stuff.
Well, that's true. Now, mind you, in Nancy's my case, she taught a water aerobics class that morning, so we weren't able to really begin shopping on Triple Force Friday till almost 10 a.m. And our first stop was our local Disney store at the Merrimack Outlets. And what was kind of interesting about what Disney did in order to get people to shop, I guess it was the first 50 shoppers who came in who spent $20 on Star Wars related merch. They had this set of 3 lithos. One was the early teaser poster for The Rise of Skywalker, a great image setting up the Mandalorian series over Disney Plus, and of course a piece of art for Jedi
Fallen Order.
Fallen Order. The Electronic Arts game. And then from there, that's again, because we live in the woods, that we have our Target, we have our Walmart. And clearly, in both cases, the Star Wars fans had been there ahead of us. It was pretty slim pickings. Though, oddly enough, I did get the one thing I was kind of interested in. In fact, I'm holding it in my hand now. There was a Funko Pop of the new droid for
Dio.
Yes.
Dio.
Yeah. I have to tell you, Dan, that one of the reasons I bought this is it kind of reminds me of Snoopy. It's such a minimalist design.
That's actually an apt comparison, especially the original Charles Schultz drawings.
Yeah. So it was like, okay, I'll take that home. It sits on my desk because it amuses me. I have no idea what role he plays in the movie, but it's like, okay, gotta have that. But let's see. In regard to other Triple Force Friday related news, of course, again, you can't have an event like this without some controversy. And I guess it was just last week after Triple Force that suddenly all these stories began to bubble up about the lack of Rose Tico merch. You must have seen some of those, Dan.
I only know about that because some of my friends texted me, because I've seriously developed sort of a side hustle of muting people who complain about Star Wars on Twitter so much that I don't see too much of it anymore.
No, that's that. I'll have to start doing that because I reached out to folks at Disney Consumer Products to say, okay, so do you guys have a response here? And the interesting thing that I got back was, I had talked about this, I think, with Drew over in Fine Tuning, that the whole notion of that, for example, Hasbro was holding back 35% of the toys that they had created for The Rise of Skywalker because they gave away key story points. That the Disney rep was just sort of like, you're not seeing Rose Tico stuff because of what Rose does in this movie, that we specifically been asked to hold her stuff back because it gives away a key, a story point. And I just found that fascinating because it's like, okay. And it's like, interesting that whatever the toy, the costume they selected for the Rose figures going out would give away something important for the films.
This is so ironic considering there was a very small but very loud percentage of people who were complaining about Rose as a character, and now they're complaining there isn't enough merchandise.
Well, there are people who will complain if they're hung with a new rope, that they have to find, something to complain about. On the other hand, to talk about the more positive aspect of the Star Wars fan community, I don't know if you saw the story that broke just today. Entertainment Weekly is doing their fall movie preview issue. And in this issue, they put in one photo from this upcoming J.J. Abrams film, and it's of the Zori Bliss character. This is the one that Kerry Russell is playing in the movie.
Right.
And basically, if you look at this shot, it's the Zori Bliss character in costume, and she's handing a round medallion disc-like object to who appears to be Oscar Isaac's characters in the Star Wars movies, Poe Dameron. And so, yeah, and again, it's just from this one image, and what was fascinating, inside of like an hour or so of time online, someone who had actually gone out on Triple Force Friday and bought the C-3PO, the 6-inch figure from the Black series, noticed that with this 6-inch figure, you can take the back of C-3PO's head off, and there on the back of the head is a shape just like this disc that Zori Bliss is handing to Poe Dameron. And they were able to suss out, okay, so that's there. And then from that sizzle reel that they showed at the D23 Expo back in August, where there's this quick image of C-3PO with bright red eyes. And so,
that's right.
What's fascinating to me is inside of an hour, from this shot showing up at, Entertainment Weekly online, the fan community had done all this detective work, and it's like, that's the disc that's used to reprogram C-3PO and, The Rise of Skywalker. And it's just sort of like, they've been waiting to figure out, well, how did his eyes turn red? So, again, that side of the community, when they can move as a group that quickly and share info and theories, that's when the Star Wars community just delights me.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of great detective work in it. It makes it tricky for a guy like me who doesn't speculate, because I'd rather deal with what is than what might be, because I end up finding myself disappointed because I get my hopes up for certain things. So I try to be very zen about it. But it's hard not to be excited, especially, I mean, that's kind of been some of the fun with some of the Hasbro stuff and Kenner stuff over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Where they give you some insights into things. It's usually never enough to really give away anything major. And unless, of course, you're talking about the Phantom Menace album, where John Williams, one of the title tracks revealed the death of Qui-Gon Jinn. But we can talk about that another time.
Well,
I'm still not over that.
Yeah,
It's been 20 years.
Okay, well, geez, folks, here we are, halfway into today's show. We've only covered Triple Force Friday. All right, tell you what, when Dan and I get back from this commercial, we're really going to pick up the pace.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify, spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Okay, so we're back, and now officially, Dan, we are entering the Force Lightning round. We have a lot of news to catch up on, so let's just get to it.
Don't we need to say, buckle up, baby? That's what we'd say before we hit light speed.
There we go. Okay. All right. For me, these are kind of in random order, but I wanted to start with a big one because I wanted your thoughts on this. So back on September 25th, the Entertainment Trades announced that Kevin Feige is being given the right to develop a Star Wars film for Lucasfilm. I have to ask, what did you think when that news came through?
I was so excited, I was practically shaking. I mean, he's one of the great storytellers of the last 10, 15 years, and I for some reason at D23 I saw him. I didn't get to talk to him, but he was pretty close to me. I just remember thinking, boy, if this guy got a hold of Star Wars, wouldn't that be phenomenal? I think it's absolutely terrific news. I know what we're going to talk about. I know what I hope it's not. There are certain characters that shouldn't come back.
Okay,
I know when the only person that never comes back is Uncle Ben. But come on. Give me a break, people.
Okay, so to what Dan is referring to here is that Kevin, as he was talking about this opportunity, mentioned that he'd already spoken with at least one performer who had been in the Marvel Cinematic Universe about, this is character I'd love you to play. And, what was fascinating is to immediately watch, again, both the Marvel fan community and the Star Wars fan community try to suss out who that might be. And the number one candidate was Samuel L. Jackson, who, of course, played, Mace Windu, who, we saw basically blasted out a window in Revenge of the Sith. And what's interesting is Samuel himself has sort of talked about this in the past. So it's like, look, we didn't see him die. He flew out a window. He could be alive. But Dan and I, in pre-gaming, you're not a fan of this idea, right?
Not at all. I mean, he got his arm cut off by Anakin and shot out a window while being infused with the Emperor's Sith lightning, and it's white hot, most angry. No, he's not alive. I mean, why? Let's let some characters move on to the Force and find some new characters. Though I do like the other person that seems to be campaigning for Star Wars. I would be okay with this.
Oh yeah, well that's the funniest part. That Brie Larson, the talented young woman who played the title character in Marvel's Captain Marvel movie earlier this year, has made absolutely no bones about, that's like, I want to be in a Star Wars movie. So it's just sort of like, I don't care what character I'm playing, I just want to be in a Star Wars movie. So it'll be interesting to see if she gets the Daniel Craig treatment. That story, right?
Oh, yeah.
The stormtrooper that tortures Rey, when she uses, really the first time she uses the Jedi mind tricks.
Yeah.
The gentleman who's in that Stormtrooper outfit is Daniel Craig. I want to be in a Star Wars movie. It's like, okay, you're going to be in there, but, nobody's going to know who you are. Anyway, to get back to, we were all excited when this news broke on September 25th, and then just today, news breaks that Kevin Feige has been named the Chief Creative Officer of Marvel Studios, and the guy is now in charge of all of the movies, all of the TV shows, everything they're doing at Disney Plus. He's even going to be consulting on, what publishing is up to, because, of course, Marvel Studios, spends a lot of its time cherry-picking product out that they then use to make the movies. And suddenly, this guy's dance card got very, very full, and now people are wondering, well, will he, in fact, actually have time to develop, a Star Wars film, which, the Dark Lord giveth and the Dark Lord taketh away. So, anyway, any thoughts on that? Or
I think that this is something that crossed my mind when I saw that, but we don't really have a time to. We know that he is going to work on a Star Wars film, but I mean, there's got to be gaps in different things, I mean, I know Marvel's got a lot of movies coming out over the next couple of years, thankfully. But I can't imagine if they've got an idea that he wants to pursue. I mean, it's going to make money. So at some point he's going to, I don't know. We'll see. It's hard to tell with this kind of stuff. There's always so many balls that they're juggling, but he seems to be quite adept at being able to multitask. I mean, he's a very creative guy that he's got my gosh, is there anybody who has more power or sway in Hollywood right now than him?
Well, more to the point, I think for me, it's the consistency. I mean, there is a level of quality from the original Iron Man in 2008 all the way through to, that he had a pretty heavy hand on Spider-Man Far From Home. So, and I just love that there's a consistent feel and a level of quality to these things. So, yeah, I'd love to see him work on a Star Wars film. But, yeah, it's just, where do you squeeze that in with that schedule? But the nice thing, though, is when this news was breaking and it looked like Kevin might not get that opportunity, at least we got a little good news to balance it out. And that was, of course, that Tony Gilroy, the talented writer-director who came to the rescue on Rogue One, has been signed to now write and direct the Cassian Andor series for Disney+. What was your take on that news, Dan?
Oh, I think it's great. I mean, he obviously already is very much on the pulse of these characters anyway from that era, that wonderful era in the history of Star Wars. So I think it's great. I mean, this is, again, more encouragement, and we saw how much Disney is spending budgetary-wise on The Mandalorian and these Marvel shows for Disney+. So the fact that they're getting this kind of talent to create the stories, I mean, the story has to drive everything. George Lucas has always said that, and we've seen proof of that. I mean, when a story is done well, anything can happen, and it's usually quite good. So I think this is it's like kind of a shot of adrenaline, really. Well,
what's kind of intriguing for me is that this one right up front, they've mentioned, is more of a spy thriller. That again, we've got Diego Luna coming back to play Andor, and the conceit this time around is it's going to tell stories in that space before the story we saw in Rogue One.
That's right.
So
it has to, because at the end of Rogue One, he's dead.
Well, there you go.
There's that little Sherlock Holmes moment I had.
What is it? The Reichenbach Falls, right? I mean, again, Mace Windu fell out a window, and maybe last minute,
Thanos snapped him back. There'd be a crossover.
Okay, there you go. Oh, by the way, but since we're talking about television-related projects and that sort of thing, Rise of the Resistance came back on, not Rise of the Resistance, Star Wars Resistance came back on Disney XD starting on October 6th. And we're 2 episodes in at this point. I know you've seen a couple of them at this point.
Yeah, I've seen the first 3. Only the first 2 are out, at least at the time of this recording, but I've seen the first 3.
Okay. And what's your take on this? I mean, again, it's kind of interesting for me that they are definitely syncing up with the events in the timeline of The Force Awakens. I thought they had done a decent job of deepening the character of Kaz by showing that, it looked like his family had been wiped out when the planet killer weapon had been fired. But just episode 2, they revealed that at least a few members of his family had survived.
Oh yeah, which was very encouraging. It changes sort of I don't know if it changes the impact of that powerful scene in the end of season 1, because Kaz still thought that his parents were gone, so it didn't take it away there. But it is kind of nice to see a Star Wars hero that still has their parents intact, avoiding that trope. So that's cool. But the level of storytelling is really quite engaging, and I like how they're running parallel with The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. It's kind of fun to do mix and match and sort of in your mind kind of make a linear timeline of where Kaz fits into all these things. And it's been fun. This is a fun series. If people are sleeping on this thing, you need to watch it because it's great fun. And season 1 will be on Disney Plus, so it'll be easy to catch up.
That it will. That's true. I guess for me, given that right up front they talked about how they were viewing Star Wars Resistance as sort of an entry point for younger Star Wars fans, and in fact, the whole idea of the racers around Colossus Station was supposed to create yet another revenue stream for the Disney Consumer Products folks. But me personally, I'm kind of intrigued with the story arc for Tam. I'm a little intrigued by how quickly one can become a pilot in the First Order. I'm going to be intrigued to see whether or not how far they go with this. Especially with the notion that this is Star Wars, supposedly, again, an entry point for the franchise for younger children, about how dark they're going to go with that character's story arc.
And you also wonder, because it's been kind of a similar beat of her having to sort of struggle with, do I want to help the Resistance? Do I believe in what they're... Or not the Resistance, do I want to help the First Order? Am I still upset at Kaz and everyone for lying to me? Or do I listen to my gut, or do I listen to my brain? I'm not really sure where to go. I can't imagine that's going to drag on for the entire season. And I don't mean drag as a pejorative. I just mean if they're going to loop that one through. Because I do like what they're doing with it. And you just don't want Tam to go down that path. Once you go down the dark path, forever will dominate your destiny. And I don't want that. So it's fun. And it definitely adds another level to this thing.
Okay, this is true. By the way, speaking of recent Star Wars related news, this one just tickled me so much, and I thought, Dan the English teacher's gotta love this. But did you see what happened just yesterday with the Oxford English Dictionary?
Oh, it's glorious.
So, all right. So, if you missed the news, folks, the Oxford English Dictionary, the lexicon, if you're someone like Dan and myself who work with words, they've officially adopted, Jedi, Padawan, and lightsaber.
That's right.
Into the words they believe are an acceptable part of the English language. They're a strong enough part of the pop culture that they had to be folded into the next edition of the book. Did you see how they changed the entries for both Force and Mind Trick?
No.
They actually added an addendum to the effect of, for the term Force, they actually say, see Jedi. Or for that matter, if you use the term Mind Trick, again, they reference, please see Jedi. Mind
Do you
trick.
mean Force is in like the actual definition of the word force as a verb?
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
beautiful. And I can legitimately say, and I'm not ashamed of this at all, I will sometimes peruse the OED as for leisure reading. I love words. So this is really cool to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Though, speaking of books, you and I have to talk about Bob Iger's memoir,
Uncle
The
Bob.
Ride of a Lifetime.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm always fascinated by the way news bubbles up. For example, I read this book when it came out earlier this month, and it's been fascinating over the last week to 10 days to watch how certain members of the Star Wars community have taken what Iger wrote and sort of twisted it into a weapon to go after the way the Disney company, and especially Kathleen Kennedy, are handling the franchise. They made a particularly large kerfuffle over the fact that, when George handed off the Star, well, he didn't hand off. He was handed $4,500,000,000 for the company, but $500,000 for the company. Excuse me. But that Disney opted not to use the outlines for the next trilogy that George wrote, and that's the thing, though. It's like Disney bought Lucasfilm, and as the new owner of this franchise, of this IP, they were looking to connect the next set of films that they were doing back to the original trilogy. So, or excuse me, and the original trilogy, not the prequels. I don't want to stress that. So, they decided to go with, their own story and that sort of thing. And George has been relatively vocal about this over time. And, there was that Larry King interview where he mentioned, that it was like kind of selling your children to the white slavers. The interesting thing about Ride of a Lifetime is it mentions that Lucas then reached out to Bob Iger, particularly when that story bubbled up, and said, I misspoke, I shouldn't have said that. It's just, if you cherry pick stuff out of a book like this, it's relatively easy to create sort of a faux headline, especially in this, our social media world, to say something is, potentially clickbait worthy, as offensive as possible. And I think, again, that's what they, the way this story, at least to my take on it, Dan, was twisted. I mean, what was your response when you saw this coming out?
I mean, the stuff about his having a hard time saying kind of goodbye to these characters in this mythology that was his life's work, that is making him famous for forever. I like that made him more relatable and more human. And negotiations have got to be tough, especially with two, giants in the industry. So that part was hard. His comments about selling his children obviously was in horribly poor taste. He made that right by talking to Bob and personally and explaining himself. That was just very nasty and unfortunate. It shows the very, very human side of things.
No, that's
so that's tough. I mean, I'm sure he would have taken that back in a heartbeat if he could. But I was more compelled with the challenge of selling Star Wars and these characters and how much he loved them. And it was nice for me as a lifelong fan of this wonderful franchise to see how much that pulled at his heartstrings. Very bittersweet, kind of lovely.
In fact, what's kind of interesting, and especially for me, I want to recommend, if you haven't read Brian J. Jones's book, he's written both an amazing biography on George Lucas as well as an equally amazing biography of Jim Henson. And what was interesting in both cases, when Henson, for example, went to sell the Muppets the first time around for I want to say $150 million to Disney in 1989. He cited almost the exact same thing that George did, to the effect of he wanted his characters to wind up in the hands of Disney because they are so good at as a company of keeping things evergreen, at keeping characters front of mind. I mean, for example, think of Mickey Mouse. Like, again, a character introduced in 1928 who, this time next year, there'll be a brand new attraction opened at Disney's Hollywood Studios, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. There's the, absolutely delightful series of shorts that have been created for the Disney Channel. In fact, that's what this attraction is going to be made of. This is a character who just, last year they had that year-long celebration of his, 80th anniversary. And kind of hopeful, having seen, Star Wars, the weekend I graduated from high school in 1977, I'd like to think come 2077 or 2057 at the 80th anniversary of Star Wars, that these characters will still be front of mind, that these will, and a lot of that'll be on the back of Disney's skill of keeping characters out there. That said, though, Dan, one of the things that fascinated me about this book is that Iger didn't necessarily sugarcoat things. When George initially approached Disney about selling Lucasfilm, he flat out said, I want the Pixar deal. And you got to remember that Disney bought Pixar for $7.4 billion back in January of 2006. But that was after Iger. In fact, Iger mentions in the book how he went up to Emeryville and they showed him the next 6 movies that Pixar was going to make. And there was this whole operating factory, of new product and of the older films Disney could work with. So it's like that made sense. Where with Lucasfilm, it was like, well, look, Iger flat out told him, you're not going to get the Pixar deal. We'll send folks up to discreetly go through your files and look over the product and that sort of thing. And after going up to Skywalker Ranch and going through all the material they had there, they came back and said, well, look, Mr. Iger, based on what we can determine, a fair price for Lucasfilm is either somewhere between $3.5 billion and $3.75 billion. And Iger was a good enough reader of people and egos to know that if he approached George with that price, which was less than Disney had paid for Marvel back in August of 2009, that they bought Marvel for $4 billion, that George was going to balk. And so, Iger thought about it, and he talks about in the book how it's like, well, okay, $4 billion and then another 500,000, so that way we paid Lucas more money than we did Marvel, so he has that for bragging rights. But the interesting thing is that Iger felt that given we're spending that much more money for Star Wars, that was the part of the book that absolutely fascinated me, Dan, where he talked about how, they were originally going to stick with the classic Star Wars release pattern, a new movie every 3 years or so, and they were like, geez, we're going to have to make that money back, so maybe we can do a new Star Wars movie every 2 years or faster than that. And to circle back on what we were talking about at the top of the show with Last Jedi and Solo, that it turns out there's a ceiling on how often people want to see a new Star Wars movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I still think that has been sort of the albatross that we've had a hard time shaking. And I'm really, really, really hopeful that The Rise of Skywalker will bring the box office juggernaut revelations that we know Star Wars to be, so we can put that to rest.
Now, speaking of the Star Wars movies and such, and what Disney's done with the franchise since, we of course have to talk about Galaxy's Edge. And what's interesting to me is, again, since we've recorded last, we see Disney tweaking. For example, out at Disneyland, the Galaxy's Edge out there, they've actually begun to introduce new menu items based on guest responses. So first time ever, you go into Ronto's Roasters, you can get a veggie type meal. Likewise, you can do the same thing at Docking Bay 7. I know this will be something, will make you happy, Dan, but they've instituted a policy at Disneyland now where you can book reservations at Oga's Cantina as far as 60 days out. So, so for someone like yourself who's, traveling all the way cross country and wants to absolutely positively get in, the fact that, you can lock that reservation in that far in advance, I mean, that's going to be a relief for a lot of folks.
Oh, it's great. I think that's great. I wouldn't be sad, though, if they said you can't book until the day of. I feel like that would just give people more of a fighting chance, because sometimes you don't know until, you're right on top of the date. But 6 months out is much more reasonable, and that's how they do things at Disney World.
That's true. That's it. Though, again, this is not 6 months out. This is 60 days out, though. Right. I bet you the Orlando one, that 6 months out is entirely possible.
Yeah, that must have been what was going on in my brain. I must have been thinking about some of the drinks at Oga's.
Okay. Frankly, another bit of good news that, broke since we were away was that the images that began to bubble up online from inside of Rise of the Resistance. In fact, I think Bob Iger himself went on Twitter to talk about how he and a set of executives at Disney had ridden the attraction, and it was literally next level stuff for Walt Disney Imagineering, that he can't wait for the public to actually start to get to experience this attraction. And so again, still December 5th for Walt Disney World, right? And
yes, that
then
sounds
January for California. So again, good news, folks. I know a lot of us have been concerned of actually going to make that, to make that opening. It looks like it's a thing now. What was more interesting to talking about California and LA, did you catch the piece that Todd Martins wrote for the Los Angeles Times about Galaxy's Edge, what works, what doesn't?
I saw that because our good friend Drew Taylor posted it on Twitter, so I followed the link through his feed, and yeah, I thought it was a very well written, very thoughtful piece.
Yeah, I mean, Todd made a lot of excellent points, and I think, one of the things he actually, sort of moves to the front is that in a lot of ways he thinks that Disney overthought the land, that, there's stuff that's absolutely wonderful, but on the other hand, it's just the notion of, I don't want to fly the Millennium Falcon to go get some coaxium. It's just sort of like, I want to fly the Millennium Falcon like I saw Han do in all of those movies. And I get the whole thing of why the Imagineers made a conscious decision that, you shouldn't be going to Tatooine, you shouldn't be going to Mos Eisley. This is all about your adventure. You're not having Luke's adventure, you're having your adventure. But, to sort of bring things back to George, what I love about George Lucas is that he is a really put the hay down where the goats can get at it kind of a guy. Have you ever heard the story about when they were doing the updates for Star Tours?
No.
And and they were discussing all the places, that they wanted the branching things to send folks to. And so George is literally at the table, and they're talking about, okay, so, we'll send them back to Hoth, and, they'll be threatened by a Wampa, and they'll suddenly be in the middle of the battle and, flying between the legs of the attack vehicles and that sort of thing. And there was this one Imagineer who raised his hands at the meeting, and it's like, Mr. Lucas, this is set in the time of the prequels. There wasn't a rebel base on Hoth at that time, and the room got really, really quiet. And it says, George was like, yeah, so, people are going to want to do this. Why don't we just give the people what they want to do? And, don't worry that it's out of time or it's out of context. This is something that people would enjoy. And that's why that wound up in the rotation, that George wasn't a stickler to, well, it can't be because this is the wrong time period. That's, for example, how you got the, that wonderful pre-flight sequence where it's Darth Vader in full costume, who's stopping your vehicle, or if you watch in the background, it's Han and Chewie with the Millennium Falcon. It's out of time. Yeah, I get that, but it's like, this is still what the fans want. So why don't we give the fans what they want? And I just want to preface this by saying that supposedly now is the new design aesthetic for the next set of Galaxy's Edges. And in fact, as I understand it, they're even looking for a different name. So,
oh, wow.
Just going to put that out there, and that The Disneyland Paris one we probably won't see till 2025, and you may need to get a plane ticket to Paris, Dan. I'm just saying.
I'll get that passport dusted off. The only thing I want to say about Todd's article we're talking about, I'd like to see this idea revisited after Rise of the Resistance has been open for 6 months. If people still are kind of balking at some of the notions of Galaxy's Edge, then okay, I think we can talk. But until it's fully complete, if anything, it may have been open a little too early. Although I certainly have amazing memories of Galaxy's Edge, and we'll go back in a heartbeat. I've been back, twice. I've back through those gates 5 times on the West Coast. Looking forward to going very soon on the East Coast, and I think the place is absolutely heaven. I mean, it's heaven. I'm a massive Star Wars fan, as are many of us, and yes, I would love to fly, through the Death Star trenches, or go through an asteroid field, or do all those things. But I didn't feel cheated on the ride because of what it offered. I just thought I'm in the cockpit of the Falcon, and that's all I could think about. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, I do love Todd's article. I think it's beautifully written.
It's a great piece, folks. It ran on October 7th, Los Angeles Times, and if you haven't read it yet, go check that out. And speaking of things you should check out, my co-host, Mr. Zehr, has so many wonderful podcasts that relate to the amazing world of the Star Wars. Dan, please walk us through those now so people know where to go and where else to find you.
Oh, sure. Well, thank you, Jim. Very kind of you. Yeah, Coffee with Kenobi is our weekly show. We try to make you think about Star Wars and laugh at the same time. We cover news. We analyze the films, the comic books, the TV shows, soon to be Disney Plus. Try to go to as many events as we can, theme parks, all that good stuff. We like talking Star Wars, and we love to have you join us. We also have a Patreon page where you have access to CWK Prover, which is our weekly show where we look at Star Wars and other pop culture as well.
Very cool. Okay. Also here at Jim Hill Media, we have some other podcasts. We have the Disney Dish that I do with Len Testa. You just talked about Drew Taylor, so he and I do the fine-tuning together. Aaron Adams, the gentleman who does a lot of the editing here, he and I do the Marvel Us Disney podcast, which talks about everything that's going on with Marvel Entertainment. Also have Universal Joint with Dustin Fuse, and he and I will be doing an event down at Universal next month, which is, by the way, at some point during that event, Dan, I promise I'll sneak away and go check out the Disney Hollywood Studios version of Galaxy's Edge.
Please do.
And speaking of which, Michelle Valladolid, who I do the I Want That podcast with, is down at Walt Disney World right now, checking out all of the merch at the resort, and we will be doing a big show once she gets back. And speaking of the shows here, folks, if you could do myself and Dan a favor, go both for the Coffee with Kenobi as well as Looking with Lucasfilm, if you could head over to iTunes and rate or recommend our shows, that helps throw additional ears and eyeballs our way. On the other hand, if you really, really, really like what we do here at Jim Hill Media, if you could subscribe to Bandcamp, that does help keep the lights on. And I think at this point, Dan, we are caught up.
I love it.
Which, of course, means that while we were recording, some huge chunk of Star Wars related news just broke, and we're going to have to hurry back and do a new show to get that. But for now, folks, thank you so much for listening, and Dan and I will hopefully be back soon.